What, might you ask, are we doing up at 7:30 in the morning on a Sunday, rolling around on the one wheel? What is going off? Well, today is an interesting day. I've been given the opportunity to pop along and film and have a look through and around a Cold War 1960s, well, I think they were in service until the 80s, nuclear bomber that is based at the airport where I live, or near where I live. So we're trundling up there now on the one wheel to meet a few of the guys. Jim, who's the airside manager, is the guy that's arranged this, and also have a chat, or at least question some of the Cold War pilots that actually flew this Vulcan bomber, and it's XH-558. And that particular bomber, the one we're going to look at now, that was the last flying Vulcan bomber, which was a display bomber until about 2015. So I don't live that far from the airport, and effectively that means that quite often I would have seen the Vulcan just sort of sailing in and doing its thing, so to speak. So we're going to get there, just checking to make sure there's not too much traffic, and we'll see what is actually going to occur. So check back in a second. So here we are at the Vulcan to the Sky Trust's Vulcan. This is XH-558. This was actually based at this airport when it was an RAF base, and was built in like the 1950s or whatever. And it's effectively, it was the last flying Vulcan, as I said before, which flew in 2015 as a display aircraft. And it's an absolutely amazing piece of kit. It's got more in common with, say, the B-2 Spirit, given that it's sort of like a flying wing Delta type aircraft, than, say, the B-52 from the 50s, which is like this huge American nuclear bomber. But this is actually a nuclear bomber, so it would have carried nuclear weapons, unconventional weapons as well. But it's a full-on nuclear war bomber from the Cold War. So let's have a quick look around. So what's actually happening here today, Jim?
So today we're doing an engine ground run, which is part of our monthly maintenance schedule. The engines on the jet have to be run every 28 days to keep them in good condition. If we don't do that, then it's not good for the engines not to be constantly stood. So we run them every 28 days. So we decided a few years ago to make a feature of it. So we now invite the public along to come and watch us do the engine run. 60 public will come today. We'll take her up to the engine running bay, and we'll run the engines up to idle. We run 3 up to 50%, and then we run 1 up to 100%, which gives us the signature howl, which you only get with an Olympus 2 Series engine. Okay, so we're climbed up into the actual cockpit area now, and this place is absolutely tiny. Absolutely tiny. It's unbelievable how small it is. There was like 5 people who sat in here in 2 different levels. So basically you've got this level up here, which is basically where the pilots sat, and this, you've got the pilot, the co-pilot and co-pilot, and then you've got back here, behind me here, if I just push this a bit further forward so you can see, we've got the bomber, radio navigator, or I can't remember what that one is, but there's 2 guys who sit here. Guy sits there as the bomber guy. And effectively it's just absolutely amazingly tiny. There's also this amazing little window down here, which is what the guy could have a look out of for bomb sighting, so you can actually see the ground as well. It is unbelievable how small it is in here, how compact it is for such a large aircraft. It's so big, it just goes to show that it was effectively all about the bombs, and none of it was about the crew. An interesting fact is that it also
These two guys had ejection seats, but these three guys didn't. So in essence, these two guys got out if the plane got shot down, but these three guys left to dive out of this very small door to try and escape a downed aircraft. Let's have a climb up this set of ladders and let's see what it's like to actually be in the cockpit of a Vulcan nuclear bomber. So this is the cockpit of the Vulcan nuclear bomber. It's very reminiscent of a fighter jet actually. It reminds me of like sort of a fighter plane rather than an actual bomber jet. What is a nav plotter? Talk to me about that.
Okay, well, two navigators in a Vulcan. One was known as a nav radar, the other was a nav plotter. Nav radar is essentially a bomb aimer. He really sat in front of the radar screen. He used the radar, helped me with the routine navigation of the aeroplane, and then when it came to actually bombing, he was looking for the target on the radar, and I then helped him manage the kit while he concentrated on aiming from the radar.
So I assume that it's quite a tight fit back there. I mean, I went up in the cockpit earlier and I was just like astounded at how it's obviously all bombs and no comfort.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to put it in perspective, I could put my hands out and I could touch both walls. Okay? And so one of the things that most people say now is that, you know, here I am 40 years later and it all seems very small. And of course, we were all a lot thinner then, and it worked. It was tight, but it worked.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
let's face it, on transit trips, we had 7 people in the back.
Wow.
Because we had the 3 of us on the bench at the back,
Yeah.
3 of us on the bench at the back, and then we had 2 crew chiefs on the jump seats down in the well.
Right, yeah.
And so it got quite cosy. The Americans were always bemused at just how many people climbed out of this aeroplane.
They used to move them around from squadron to squadron
Right, okay.
and from base to base, purely for the to eke out the engineering side of things. Whether it was a minor servicing or a major servicing. So, and it also depended on whether the squadrons had squadron servicing or it was a combined station servicing. Initially, when I joined them, the aircraft were a station asset, and therefore, if you look in my logbook, there's a lot of different tail numbers.
Right.
But
Yeah.
then eventually in the mid to late 80s, in my case, we went down to squadron servicing, and therefore we only had our own allocated aircraft, and you can see that tail number then coming out time and time again in the logbook. So that's the way it worked.
Right.
Coincidental, I've looked through my logbook, I have flown 558. On one occasion we took it to Goose Bay over in Canada for a display over there. But of course, again, with the aircraft, they changed roles. This particular aircraft, of course, changed roles as well, in that it became gosh, I've got to think of this squadron, 27 Squadron up at Scampton, where it was used for reconnaissance type missions, and when they moved it there, obviously I didn't have anything to do with that, but of course moving the airframe meant that only those on that squadron would then fly it.
Right.
So that's the way it works.
So what led you to be involved with Vulcan to the Sky then?
I live in Retford. No, it would have been nice to actually get involved when it was flying. Sadly, I was down in Cornwall at the time working for the Navy, and to come out of Cornwall was ridiculous on a weekend, and it just been far too difficult, particularly as it was based when it was based up country. So that made it difficult. But when we moved for our daughter and grandson's sake, we moved to Retford. Then I was close by and I came along and got involved about 5 years ago, 6 years ago was it? And I've been here ever since.
And have you always flown Vulcans, or did you fly other aircraft before that?
Well, I did the training aircraft that you did at the time, Chipmunk, Jet Provost, Varsity in those days, twin piston, and then came onto this. But after this, I went back into the training world and I flew the Jetstream and Domini, the HS-125. So, yeah, and through my career, I've had trips in various aircraft as well. I've flown in a Harrier, I've flown in a Jaguar, and things like that. But as the longest time I spent on any aircraft it was the Vulcan for 10 years.
And if you had to pick an aircraft that you thought were the one to fly all the time,
That's not a that's
Is
that
that
is such a simple question to answer, isn't it? Well, you know, it's here, isn't it? It has to be.
so here we are now actually underneath the jet, and we're just waiting for it to actually start up now. Was absolutely amazing, utterly unbelievable. Every single cell in my body was shaking when I stood underneath that aircraft. It was so loud. I'm pretty sure that the recording of this is not going to do it justice at all in terms of how loud it is. And I would say, if you got the opportunity to come and see this amazing piece of machinery, this unbelievable piece of technology from 1950s, I would definitely say come and do it. So with that, I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace!